Hello there, and welcome to Sleepy Galaxy Channel. Tonight we ask a question that sounds like a dare. Why is Saturn, of all the worlds drifting in our sky, called the scariest planet? And the answer, once you let it settle, turns out to be a kind of lullaby. Because everything that first looks like dread out there is only distance, wearing a shadow's coat, waiting for your eyes to adjust. Think of tonight as a house we are going to walk through together. One long left standing at the edge of town, its windows dark, its reputation worse than its rooms. A house that, room by room, reveals itself not as something to fear, but as a cathedral, vast and lit from within, so that by the last hallway you will wonder how you ever thought to be afraid of it. We have 4 slow regions to drift through tonight, and you can let all 4 go, because I will carry them for you. First we stand on the doorstep, in the dark, learning why this ringed giant earned its haunted name across that long, dim approach through the outer solar system. A walk so unhurried it takes light itself more than an hour to arrive. Then, we step inside the haunted rooms, where storms churn wide enough to swallow whole countries and a strange 6-sided pattern spins forever at the pole, and where, at the bottom of a stairwell of cloud, we find the very center of the fear, and find it smaller than we thought. From there, we are carried up and out, through corridors of light strung across the rings themselves, ice and stone arranged with such patience that the haunting begins to look, unmistakably, like architecture. And at the end, the cathedral opens fully, its moons like candle-lit side chapels tucked along the nave, and the long, patient history of human eyes that looked into this same darkness and, one careful glance at a time, turned dread into wonder. If a story like this helps you close your eyes a little easier, a like or a subscribe helps the channel reach others who are also lying awake tonight, somewhere out there, looking for the same kind of hush you're settling into now. That's only if it feels easy. Nothing here asks anything of you. There is nothing here to hold on to, and nothing you need to remember by morning. Let your shoulders ease down into wherever you're resting. Let your jaw loosen. Let your hands go heavy and still. Settle in. Let's begin. Let your shoulders find the mattress the way a coat finds a familiar hook, and let your breath settle into whatever rhythm it wants tonight, because there is nowhere else you need to be and nothing left for you to carry. Step outside with me, just for a moment, out of the room and into the open dark, and look up. There, low over the rooftops or high above the tree line, hangs a small, steady point of gold, not blinking the way stars blink, but holding its light the way a lamp holds its light when a household has already gone to bed and left just one window lit for whoever comes home late. That is Saturn. It has always been there, this same patient gleam, watched by shepherds and sailors and children on windowsills for as long as there have been eyes turned upward, and tonight it is watching over you too, if a lamp can be said to watch over anything, which perhaps it can. Notice how little it asks of you. It does not flare or flicker or demand your attention the way a passing plane does, or a falling star. It simply holds its place, night after night, in the exact unhurried way a lamp left burning holds its place for someone still finding their way home. You could look away for an hour, for a season even, and when you looked back, it would be exactly where patience had left it, a little further along its endless circuit, but no less steady. And yet, somewhere along the long telling of Saturn's story, someone gave it a strange and unlikely reputation. Ask nearly anyone who has spent time with astronomy shows or late-night documentaries, and you may hear this planet described with a kind of hushed relish called eerie called violent, even called the scariest planet in the solar system. It seems an odd thing to say about a lamp. It seems an odd thing to say about a light so steady that entire calendars were once built around its slow crawl through the stars. Somewhere between the ancient watchers who trusted it enough to mark their years by it, and the modern voices who now warn you away from it with words borrowed from ghost stories, something shifted, and it is worth understanding exactly what. So tonight, before sleep takes you the rest of the way, we are going to ask that question honestly, without hurrying past it, and without pretending it isn't there, because the answer turns out to be far more comforting than the question ever let on. Why do people call this gentle-looking light the scariest planet? What could possibly be frightening about something so far away, so quiet, so unbothered by us? Here is how we will spend the hours ahead, and you don't need to remember any of it. You only need to let it happen the way you let a familiar story happen when someone reads it to you as a child. Think of Saturn tonight, the way you might think of an old house on the edge of town. One of those houses every neighborhood seems to have. The kind children dare each other to approach and never quite do. The kind where the shutters hang a little crooked and the windows catch the last light in a way that looks, if you squint, almost like watching eyes. People whisper about a house like that. They say there are sounds inside it after dark, shapes moving where nothing should move, a coldness in certain rooms that has no explanation. And because no one ever actually walks through the whole house, room by room, the rumors simply accumulate, one on top of another, until the house is more legend than building. Tonight, we are going to walk through that house. Not quickly, not bravely, not the way a dare requires you to walk, hurrying past the frightening parts with your eyes half shut. We are going to walk slowly, the way you walk through somewhere you actually have all the time in the world to see, pausing at each doorway, letting our eyes adjust before we decide what we are looking at. And here is the secret this particular house has been keeping. The secret we will only fully understand once we have gone all the way through it. It was never a haunted house at all. It is a cathedral. Every room that seemed to hold a shadow will turn out to be holding light instead. Stained glass instead of cobwebs, a furnace instead of a curse, and by the time we reach the last doorway, you will understand why the ones who built this reputation for Saturn were not entirely wrong to feel awe standing in front of it. They simply mistook awe, at first glance, for fear. That mistake is easy to make from a distance. It dissolves completely once you're inside. Think of how any old house looks different by street lamp than it does at noon, how the same crooked shutter that seems ominous at midnight is, by daylight, just a shutter someone never quite got around to fixing. We are not going to pretend the shadows in this house don't exist tonight. We are simply going to carry a small, unhurried light through each of them and watch what the shadows turn out to actually be. So let's begin the way any real visit begins, not at the front door yet, but with a look at the house from where you are standing now, safe on the sidewalk, safe in your own bed. Nothing asked of you, except your attention. Saturn is the 6th planet from the Sun, the 2nd largest world in our solar system, and it belongs to that quiet family of worlds we call gas giants, planets with no solid ground to stand on, built instead from thick, swirling atmospheres wrapped around themselves, layer after layer, like something that has spent billions of years slowly settling into its own shape. It sits nearly 1.5 billion kilometers from the Sun, which is a distance almost too large to hold in the mind all at once. So let it stay soft and unmeasured for now, simply understood as far, far out past the world you already know, past the orbit of Earth and Mars and the busy asteroid belt. out where sunlight has already spent most of its warmth reaching everything closer in first. And yet, for all that distance, Saturn has never once been a stranger to us. Long before telescopes existed, long before anyone had a name for a gas giant or a light year or an orbit, people everywhere already knew this light. Ancient astronomers in Mesopotamia tracked its slow path across the sky and folded it into their calendars. Watchers in China, in India, in the deserts and river valleys of every early civilization that kept records of the heavens noted this same golden point moving with unusual patience among the fixed stars, taking nearly 30 years to complete a single lap, so slow that a person might watch it cross the same patch of sky only 2 or 3 times in an entire lifetime. It needed no lens, no instrument, no permission from technology to be seen. It has simply always been available to anyone willing to look up on a clear night, which is perhaps the gentlest thing a planet can be, not hidden, not guarded, not requiring anything special of you, except that you tilt your head back and notice it. In old star charts, it wears 100 different names: Kronos to one people, Shani to another, a wandering elder, a keeper of harvests and time. But underneath all the names, everyone was pointing at the same unwavering gold, the same faithful lamp making its long, unbroken circuit above every roof that has ever sheltered a sleeping child. That is where we begin tonight then, not with fear, but with familiarity. A lamp that has hung in humanity's window for the whole of recorded history. A light every culture has claimed as its own at some point, given names to, told stories about, used to mark harvests and floods and the turning of long years. If this is a haunted house, it is one that has stood in plain view the entire time, never hiding behind fog or distance, simply waiting, patiently, for visitors willing to walk closer. And so, we will let the ground beneath you loosen its hold, the way it does in the last minutes before sleep, when your body forgets it is lying on a mattress and simply feels light, unanchored, ready to drift. Let that same lightness carry you now, gently lifting you away from the warm, familiar neighborhood of the inner solar system, away from the sun's close and constant heat, away from the rocky little worlds crowded near its light. There is no rush to this leaving. Nothing pulls at you. Nothing pushes. You simply begin to move outward, the way a leaf might drift from a riverbank into slower, wider water, carried more than traveling, watching the warmth behind you fade by such small degrees that you barely notice it going. Ahead, still small, still just a point of gold hanging in the dark, is the house we're walking toward tonight. The front walk is still long. There is no reason to hurry down it. Let the distance do what distance does, unhurried, patient, drawing you closer with every slow breath, out toward the golden lamp in the window, out toward the first room of the house that will, room by room, become a cathedral. And so the drift begins, the way any long walk begins, with a single step off a lit porch into the dark beyond it. You are leaving the warm rooms of the inner solar system now, the ones crowded close around the sun, and the light that has always meant daytime and safety starts, almost imperceptibly, to thin. By the time you would reach Saturn's front walk, the sunlight falling on your shoulders carries only about 1% of what it gives to Earth. Notice how that sounds, at first, like a loss. A house at the end of a long unlit road, porch lamp turned down to an ember. But let the thought settle instead of tightening around it. A dimmer light is not a frightened light. It is simply a light that has traveled far enough to soften, the way a lamp seen through a curtain is not gone, only gentled, only far. You are walking toward a place where daylight itself learns to whisper. The cold deepens as you go, the way cold always deepens on a long walk after sunset, and there is no need to hurry past this feeling, only to notice that cold, out here, is not a wound. It is simply distance made touchable. The temperature of a world that has moved far enough from any hearth to keep its own quiet climate. Out at Saturn, in that thin light, the air a visiting body would feel is somewhere near -170 degrees Celsius, and yet nothing about that number needs to sting. Think instead of the particular hush of a winter night when snow has muffled every sound on the street, the way cold can feel less like an absence and more like a held breath. You are walking through that kind of hush now, step by unhurried step, the road lengthening beneath you as the warmth of home falls farther behind, replaced by something less like loss and more like stillness settling into your shoulders, an outdoor quiet you could lean your whole weight against. There is a particular comfort, too, in how long this stretch of road takes to walk, because a journey this unhurried gives the mind time to loosen its grip on old fears before it ever has to meet them face to face. Light itself takes over an hour to cross this distance from the sun, so that the gold glow ahead of you is always, in a sense, an old letter, news that left its sender a good while ago and has only just now reached your eyes. There is nothing urgent in a letter that took an hour and a half to arrive. There is only patience, folded into every photon, patience you are invited to borrow for the rest of this walk. And as you walk, the point of light ahead begins, very slowly, to change. At first, Saturn is only that, a point, a steady gold coal caught low in a dark field, indistinguishable in size from any star scattered near it. But a point of light on the horizon of a house at the end of a long walk is different from a star, because a point of light on a walk is a promise that it will eventually become a door. So it is here. With every stretch of road behind you, the point swells, degree by degree, from a pinprick into a disc, from a disc into a shape, until what was once indistinguishable from starlight resolves into an entire world hanging in front of you, 9 Earths wide, laid edge to edge. A golden globe, so broad that if you tried to walk its equator on foot, you would need to cross a distance nearly 10 times the width of your own home planet. And yet, for all that vastness, there is nothing here to brace against. A world this size sounds, on paper, like something that should loom, should press down, but hold the next fact beside it the way you'd hold 2 stones to compare their weight. Saturn could swallow 95 Earths worth of mass into its great pale body. And still, were there an ocean broad enough to hold it, this entire giant would float. Almost all of it is gas, breath and cloud gathered into a shape only pretending to be solid. The haunted house on the hill, it turns out, is built mostly of air. Nothing this light can truly loom over you. You could set a hand against its outer cloud and feel, if such a thing were possible, something closer to the give of a held pillow than the cold press of stone. There is another kind of distance folded into this approach, and it isn't measured in kilometers at all, but in years, in whole seasons of a human life. Saturn takes 29.5 of our years to complete a single slow circuit of the Sun, which means one Saturnian year is not a season or a handful of birthdays, but nearly a third of an ordinary lifetime. A child born under one turning of its orbit could grow, finish school, fall in love, and start a family of their own before Saturn had gone even once around the lamp at the center of everything. Say that to yourself softly, and feel how it reframes the walk you're on. You are not approaching something fast or frantic. You are approaching a world that moves at the pace of whole human chapters. A planet whose very sense of time is unhurried by design, patient in a way that makes your own small worries about minutes and hours seem, for a moment, beside the point. The front walk to this house is long. Yes, but it was never built for running. Somewhere along that walk, if you watch closely, the first hint of the rings appears, and this is where the old ghost stories about this place like to begin. From certain angles, early on, the rings are edge on to your approach, a single knife-thin line slicing straight across the golden disc, there and then almost not there, flickering in and out depending on how the light falls. It is easy to see how a thin, sharp line drawn across a lit window might read as something uncanny from a distance, a crack in a wall, a blade left standing where it shouldn't be. But keep walking, keep changing your angle the way you would circling any house to see it properly, and the line begins to widen. It tilts. It opens. What looked, from directly in line, like the thinnest of fractures reveals itself instead to be a broad and gentle sweep, tipped toward you like a door swinging inward on some vast, unhurried hinge. A knife edge, given time and a changing vantage, becomes an entrance. That is the whole shape of this walk in miniature. Things that seem to threaten only because you are seeing them from one narrow angle, in poor light, at the wrong distance. Because that, really, is what the dread on this stretch of road is made of. Not danger, but distance and dimness working together on an unlit mind. It is easy, isn't it, standing at the base of any long, dark drive, to let the mind fill the space between you and the lit windows ahead with shapes that aren't there. That is an old human reflex, worn smooth by however many centuries of ancestors who needed to be a little wary of unlit paths. But you can let that reflex loosen its grip tonight, because dark porches, more than almost anything else, are quiet ones. There is no crowd out here, no clamor, no light pollution smearing the sky into a nervous glow. Only the enormous, unbothered hush of open space, broken by nothing but your own breathing and the slow golden burn of the world ahead. The very qualities that make this approach feel eerie from far off, the thinness of the light, the depth of the cold, the size of the silence, are the same qualities that make it, up close, one of the most restful walks there is. Nothing out here is rushing toward you. Nothing is waiting to startle you at the door. There is only more and more room to breathe, more and more sky opening around you as the golden house grows larger and closer, and somehow less frightening with every step. The way any dreaded destination softens once you're finally near enough to see it clearly. So let the last stretch of this walk carry you the rest of the way, past the ring's opening door, past the point where Saturn stops being a light in the distance and becomes, instead, the whole horizon, curved in gold and close enough now to feel less like a destination and more like an arrival. The cloud tops are just ahead, banded in pale honeys and creams, drifting in long, unhurried streams, the way smoke drifts above a fire that has settled into embers. This is the threshold now, the front step of the haunted house, worn smooth by 4 centuries of curious footsteps before yours. Nothing asks you to hurry across it. But the door is open. The light beyond it is warmer than it looked from the road, and just beneath that first soft layer of cloud, the house's very first room is already stirring, awake, restless, and, as you're about to find, far gentler than its old and frightened name would ever let you believe. The cloud tops close over you, the way a doorway closes over a hallway, and the first room of the house receives you. This is where the rumors started, you realize. Not with the whole planet, but with this one chamber, this single golden room where the air itself seems to remember every argument it has ever had with itself. You are inside Saturn's weather now, and the weather has a temper, and somehow that is allowed to be all right. The walls of this room are made of banded amber and cream, layer folded over layer the way old varnish folds over old wood, each stripe a different current moving at a different speed than the one beside it. Nothing here is still, not for a moment, and yet nothing here is urgent either. It is closer to the murmur of a house settling at night, boards ticking as they cool, pipes finding their old familiar knock. You could mistake it, at first listen, for something restless. Stay a little longer, and you start to hear it instead as a kind of breathing, vast and unbothered, the sound any enormous body makes simply by existing at that scale. Every so often, roughly once per Saturn year, which is to say once every 29.5 of our own, something wakes up in the northern latitudes and begins to climb. Astronomers call it the Great White Spot, though spot is far too small a word for what it becomes. It starts as a pale knot of upwelling cloud, ammonia ice pushed up from some warmer layer beneath, catching the sunlight in a way the surrounding bands do not. And then it grows. The 2010 eruption is the one people remember best, because it did not stay a knot at all. It unfurled a tail that stretched around the planet's own circumference, wrapping Saturn in a pale ribbon that took the better part of a year to fully close the loop upon itself. Imagine a single storm long enough to gird a world 9 Earths wide. Imagine watching it from a very safe chair, at a very safe distance, wrapped in something warm, while it happens to someone else's sky. That is the trick this room plays on you, and it is a kind and honest trick. The storm is real, its numbers are real, and none of it can touch you here. You get to hold the fact the way you'd hold a locket, turning it over, admiring the craftsmanship, feeling no danger in its weight. Consider how far that pale ribbon actually had to travel to close its loop around the whole of the planet. A circumference greater than 9 Earths laid end to end. A distance that would take the fastest thing humans have ever built the better part of a year to circle at cruising speed. And Saturn's own storm did it on foot, so to speak, riding nothing but its own churning updrafts and the planet's ferocious winds. Spacecraft happened to be watching that year, cameras trained on the swelling white knot as it stretched itself thinner and longer. A comet-shaped smear of cloud pulling itself all the way around the girth of a gas giant until head met tail again on the far side, a full year after it first opened its eye. It is the kind of event astronomers wait entire careers to witness even once, and you are simply lying here, being told about it, the way a child might be told about a wolf that lives very far away and has never once found the house. Inside that pale, unrolling tail, lightning moves. Saturn's lightning is not a polite cousin of Earth's. It can flare up to 10,000 times more powerful than the bolts that split our own summer skies. Radio bursts so strong that spacecraft passing nearby have listened to them the way you might listen to surf. A steady crackle riding underneath the wind. Ammonia ice clouds hold the charge the way a held breath holds tension, and then release it in white detonations that no ear on Earth will ever hear directly, because Saturn's atmosphere swallows the sound the way distance swallows every argument that isn't yours to carry. What reaches us instead is a signal, decoded, printed as a waveform, thunder translated into ink, into light on a screen, into something you can look at, rather than something that can startle you awake. That is the whole of the danger, really. Thunder heard from a warm bed, muffled by a wall thick enough to be a planet, arriving to you already gentled by hundreds of millions of kilometers of patient empty space. It is fair to call this the planet's haunted house reputation, earned honestly. A world that erupts in storms wide enough to swallow continents, that lights itself from within with bolts stronger than anything our own sky can throw. Of course, somebody, somewhere, decided that was frightening, and in daylight, on a page meant to alarm you, it might have been. But you are not reading that page. You are standing in the room itself, and rooms are always less frightening than their reputations. The storm does not reach for you. The lightning does not know you exist. What you are actually witnessing, up close and at a whisper, is a planet breathing hard the way anything enormous occasionally must. An exhale so big it takes a year to finish, then decades of quiet before the next one begins. Even the word poltergeist, if you turn it over long enough, starts to lose its edge. A poltergeist is frightening because it is unaccountable, a noise with no known cause, a door that closes itself, a knock that answers to nothing you can name. Saturn's storms fail that test entirely, and fail it in the most reassuring way possible. Every one of them has a cause, a mechanism, a name. Warm air rises from beneath the ammonia deck. It cools as it climbs, condenses into fresh white cloud, releases its own latent heat, and rises further still, feeding the very storm it is building, the way a fire feeds itself on its own draft until the fuel or the season runs out. There is nothing here that a physicist cannot follow from first cause to last flicker of lightning. A haunting resists explanation. This does not. This is simply weather on a scale so large it borrowed, for a while, the vocabulary we usually reserve for nightmares. And here is the part that turns the poltergeist into something closer to a caretaker. These storms are not random. They are seasonal. They cluster near Saturn's own summer in the northern hemisphere, tied to the tilt of the planet and the slow wheel of its orbit, the way our own thunderstorms cluster near July rather than January. A poltergeist rattles chains at 3 a.m. for no reason anyone can predict. This house does nothing of the kind. It erupts on a schedule written in axial tilt and sunlight, on a clock that has been ticking since before there were eyes anywhere to read it, and it has kept that appointment, storm after storm, for as long as anyone has been watching closely enough to notice the pattern repeat. There is something almost liturgical in that rhythm, if you let yourself hear it that way. Not chaos knocking on the walls, but a bell being rung at the same hour every year, in the same room, by hands that never miss. A liturgy does not need you to understand its language to feel its order settle over a room. You only need to notice that it returns, that it is not the first time, that it will not be the last. The storm is the housekeeping time. Saturn's version of a clock chiming in a hallway you happen to be standing in, enormous, yes, and lit from within, but no less a matter of schedule and season than the tide is, or the turning of leaves, or your own breath finding its rhythm as you lie here listening to all of this from somewhere so much smaller and so much safer. So let the thunder be there, low under everything, a hum rather than a threat. Let the pale tale of that long-ago storm keep unrolling itself around the planet in your mind, slow enough now that you can watch each new loop arrive without flinching. Because you already know how the story ends. It closes the circle. It fades. The sky calms itself the way skies do, on a schedule no one had to enforce. This first room was never sealed to frighten you. It was built the way a chapel bell tower is built, loud on purpose only sometimes, and always, underneath the noise, keeping a kind of faithful count. Leave the storm behind you now, still murmuring its distant thunder, and let the current of the wind carry you northward, up past the pale ribbons of ammonia cloud, toward the crown of the planet where the atmosphere folds itself into something the eye almost refuses to believe. The air grows stranger the higher you drift, and stranger, in this house, has already proven itself to mean only that another room is waiting to be understood rather than feared. Ahead, where the pole should simply taper the way any spinning world's pole tapers, the clouds instead gather themselves into walls, straight ones, impossibly straight, meeting at corners as if some vast and patient architect had taken a jet stream and folded it, fold after fold, into a shape with exactly 6 sides. The thunder fades the way thunder always does, when you are safe indoors, and the tail of that great pale storm keeps unwinding behind you as you drift on, north, over the shoulder of the planet, toward a place where the clouds themselves seem to have been laid out with a ruler. You are leaving the first room now, the one with the lightning and the long white scar, and carrying only the hush that follows it, that particular hush a house holds after something loud has finally stopped. Ahead, at the very crown of Saturn, where the pole should simply be round the way every pole you have ever known is round, something else is waiting. A shape, 6 straight sides, 6 corners, turning together as one unbroken ring, as if a giant window frame had been set down over the top of the world and left there to spin. Come closer, and the shape does not soften into an illusion the way distant things sometimes do. Each of its 6 sides, laid flat, would stretch wider than your entire home planet, edge to edge. A single wall of that hidden chamber longer than the whole width of Earth, and there are 6 such walls, meeting at 6 corners, none of them blurring, none of them rounding off the way a real storm's edges, always eventually round. You could set the whole Earth down inside one straight stretch of that turning border, and still have room left at either end. It is a strange comfort, oddly, to have a number that large to hold on to, not because it makes the shape less immense, but because a number is a solid thing to rest your attention on, the way counting slow breaths gives a busy mind somewhere safe to stand while the rest of the room settles around it. This is the second room, and it is the strangest one in the whole house because a hexagon feels like a thing a hand would have to draw. Storms you can accept from a planet, swirling, tearing, softening again. Because storms are shapeless by nature, and shapelessness never asks to be explained. But straight edges asked for on a world with no edges anywhere else, 6 of them, matched almost perfectly, holding their corners through years and decades without smearing into the curve everything around them obeys. That is the kind of detail a haunted house is built from in the stories you were told as a child. The locked room with the too tidy furniture. The hallway where the wallpaper repeats exactly, tile for tile, long after wallpaper should have faded unevenly. You have been told your whole life that nature abhors a straight line, and here is a straight line 6 times over, wrapped around the top of a gas giant, nearly 100,000 kilometers across. And it has been there a long time. When the Voyager spacecraft passed this way at the start of the 1980s, their instruments already found it fully formed, already turning, already 6-sided, with no sign of a beginning anyone could point to. Decades later, other craft arrived and found it again, patient and unchanged, the corners still where the corners had been, the storm at its center still slowly rotating in its own private hurricane, thousands of kilometers wide, tucked inside the hexagon like a pupil inside an iris. A shape that outlasts human lifetimes without needing to repair itself is exactly the kind of thing that, in an old story, would make you back slowly out of the room and pull the door shut behind you. So let yourself feel that flicker of unease, because it is an honest one, and then let it settle, because the explanation is not a secret kept from you. It is simply patient, the way real answers usually are. What you are looking at is wind. Nothing carved this shape, and nothing is holding it in place from outside. It holds itself, the way a whirlpool holds its own spiral, the way a flame holds its own outline even while every part of it is moving. Deep in Saturn's northern latitudes runs a jet stream, a river of air circling the pole at close to 320 meters every second, faster than sound travels through the air you are breathing right now. A jet that fast, confined to a narrow lane at a particular latitude, does not simply blow around and around in a smooth circle forever. Under the right conditions, it begins to wobble, and that wobble, instead of dying out, locks into a standing wave, a pattern that holds its shape even as the material flowing through it never stops moving. Picture a fast, narrow current pushed just slightly off true, so that its wobble finds a rhythm it likes and keeps repeating, corner after corner. The way a jump rope thrown just right will settle into a fixed loop of waves, even though the rope itself is only ever traveling in one direction. 6 corners is simply the number this particular river, at this particular speed, at this particular pole, has settled into and kept. Change the speed, and models built to test this show the count of corners can change too. 5 sides, 7, 8. Proof that the hexagon is not a fixed monument someone installed but a live equation, still being solved, still holding steady, only because the conditions that produced it have not needed to change. This is the moment the haunted house begins to explain itself, and it does so gently, without taking away any of the wonder. The locked room was never locked by a will. It was locked by physics finding the shape that costs it the least energy to keep, the way a soap film pulled across a wireframe always finds the smoothest surface it can without anyone telling it to. A hexagon spinning for 4 decades and more is not a threat holding its ground. It is a groove worn so precisely into the moving air that the air itself cannot help but keep returning to it, night after Saturnian night, season after Saturnian season. There is something almost tender in that persistence, the way a hallway floor might wear a soft path exactly down its center from years of the same feet walking the same familiar line, except here, the feet are made of wind, and the floor remakes itself perfectly every time. And once you have felt that, once the geometry has gone from uncanny to understood, the rest of the wind on this planet becomes easier to hold, too, even though the numbers are larger than almost anything the sky above your own home has ever produced. Move away from the hexagon, down out of the high latitudes towards Saturn's wide equatorial band, and the winds there are the fastest anywhere in the solar system, gusting past 1,800 kilometers an hour in the open lanes of cloud. Said plainly, a number like that could sound like the loudest kind of danger, a howling you would want to shut a window against. But there is no window here, and no wall for that howling to hit, and no ground for it to tear at, only more sky, thousands of kilometers of open gas, with nothing standing in the way to turn speed into damage. A wind is only frightening in a house with walls. Out here, In a planet built entirely of moving air layered on moving air, that great equatorial river simply flows, the way a wide, deep current flows through open ocean, fast at its center and utterly without menace, because there is nothing in its path to be broken. This, then, is the quiet lesson of the second room, the parts of this house that looked most deliberately strange, the sealed hexagonal chamber at the top of the stairs, the corridor of wind too fast to imagine, turn out to be the parts most fully governed by ordinary law, fluid finding pattern the way it always eventually does, given enough room and enough time. Nothing here was built by an intention pressed down from outside. It assembled itself, the way frost finds its six-sided crystals on a cold window, without any hand guiding the ice, the way a flock of birds turning together in the evening sky needs no leader calling the shape. You came into this room half expecting a curse and found, instead, a kind of architecture, proof, faint but real, gathering slowly as you go deeper, that whatever built this house did not build it to frighten you. You let the hexagon spin on above you, steady and unbothered, the way it has spun since long before you arrived, and will keep spinning long after you leave. And you turn your attention downward instead, away from the high, bright cloud deck and its wind-carved crown. There is a lower door in this house, one none of the tour guides like to mention by name, the one that leads not sideways into another room but straight down, past the last cloud, into the part of the planet that has no floor to stand on and no light to see by. The air beneath you thins in one sense and thickens in another, and you feel yourself begin, very gradually, to sink, leaving the storms and the strange, patient hexagon behind you, drifting toward the basement everyone in this house has warned you about. And now you let the hexagon close behind you like a door you were never meant to notice, and the cloud deck simply stops holding you up. There is no landing here. You have been told, perhaps since childhood, that a planet is a place you could stand on if only you traveled far enough, and Saturn quietly refuses that promise. You keep waiting for a floor, the way your foot waits for a stair tread it can't yet see in the dark, and the stair tread never arrives. This is the room every haunted house saves for last. The one down a staircase nobody wants to take, and tonight you take it anyway. Because you already know, somewhere underneath the listening, that nothing here can reach you. You are only visiting a story that science has already turned all the way around. At first, the falling barely feels like falling. The gas you moved through above simply thickens, patiently, the way afternoon thickens into evening without a seam. Hydrogen, the lightest breath of matter in the universe, is what fills this basement floor to ceiling, and as you sink it, stops behaving like air and starts behaving like something closer to water. Not with a line drawn between the two, not a surface to bump against, but a long, unhurried change of mind, gas easing into liquid the way a held note eases into silence. You could spend a human lifetime falling through that transition and never once feel a threshold underfoot. That absence of a floor, which sounded so frightening from the porch, turns out to be the gentlest kind of held, nothing to trip on, nothing to fall on too hard. You are simply lowered, the way a hand is lowered into warm water, inch by inch, into more of the same soft world. Farther down, the pressure begins to make itself known, not as violence, but as a tension. Millions of atmospheres of it, layer stacking patiently on layer. The whole vast weight of the planet above pressing its unhurried decision down through everything below. Under that pressure, hydrogen does something almost impossible to picture, and yet perfectly natural to matter under enough care, Its atoms are squeezed so close that the electrons stop belonging to any one of them and start moving freely between them all, and the gas becomes what scientists call metallic hydrogen. Dark, dense, and electrically alive, conducting the way a piece of metal conducts. Though no one on Earth has ever held a piece of it in their hand, try to picture it not as a wall of iron, but as a heavy, humming ocean, thick with a current you cannot see, closer to a held breath than a barrier. It is this restless metallic sea, turning slowly with the planet's rotation, that is thought to weave Saturn's enormous magnetic field into being, the very shelter that will, later tonight, curl its unseen arm around you and keep the solar wind at a tender distance. The scariest floor in the house is already, quietly, building your protection. There is no thunder down here to announce any of it, no crack of a poltergeist knocking somewhere overhead. The only sound, if sound could travel through matter this dense, would be a low, continuous hum. The current of that metallic ocean turning with the planet itself once every 10 hours and change, faithful as a heartbeat kept for a body far larger than any single room could hold. You are not being watched by anything in this basement. You are, if anything, being carried inside the workings of something enormous and orderly, a mechanism built long before any listener arrived to wonder at it, and it will keep this same rhythm long after tonight is finished. And laced through that deep, dark ocean is a kind of rain unlike any you felt on your skin. Helium, cooling as it sinks, begins to condense out of the surrounding hydrogen the way breath condenses on a cold window, forming droplets that are heavier than what holds them, and so they fall. Not in a storm, not in a single afternoon, but in a rain so unhurried it is measured in millions of years, each droplet drifting down through the pressure toward the core, warmed by friction as it goes, releasing its small store of heat into the planet around it. Picture it like this: a rain that has been falling since before there were mountains on Earth. Since before there was an Earth to have mountains. Still falling now, patient past any patience you have ever practiced, still falling as you listen. It is not a rain that erodes or floods, it is a rain that feeds a fire. Because at the very center of all that pressure and all that slow falling rain, Saturn keeps a core hotter than the surface of the sun. A fact that sounds, said plainly, like the darkest possible secret a haunted house could keep in its basement. Sit with that for a moment. The way you might sit at the top of a stairwell, listening for a sound that turns out, when you finally place it, to be only the furnace clicking on. A furnace in a crypt. That is the shape of it, heat, not malice, radiating outward from rock and metal squeezed and warmed since the planet was born, added to by every droplet of helium rain that has ever completed its long fall. And here is where the room turns, gently, from frightening to astonishing, the way every room in this house has turned before it. Saturn glows. Not to your eye, not in visible light you could see from a window, but in the low infrared breath it gives off to space. Saturn radiates more than twice the heat it receives from the distant sun. It is, in its own patient way, a small sun of its own devising, lightless but warm, generating far more than it was ever given. This is the truth the basement was hiding the whole time, and it is the opposite of what the house's reputation promised. A haunted basement is supposed to take. This one gives. The bottomless dark you feared descending into is not devouring anything. Not you. Not light. Not warmth. It is making warmth, continuously, the way a body makes its own heat while it sleeps. Without asking, without effort. Simply because it is what a body this size and this old naturally does. The crushing pressure that seemed, from above, like something that could flatten a person into nothing, is instead the very engine that keeps a golden light burning at the heart of everything above it. The storms that wander the upper clouds, the hexagon holding its 6 calm walls, even the pale gold color you first noticed from your window on Earth, all of it fed, in some slow, indirect way, by a furnace no one can see, tucked at the bottom of a house with no bottom. What looked like an ending is a source. What looked like the deepest kind of alone is the deepest kind of a light. You don't have to understand the physics to feel the shift. You only have to notice that the dark around you has stopped feeling cold. There is a kind of temperature to true safety, and this is it. An old, low glow held far beneath your feet, or beneath wherever your feet would be if a floor existed, radiating up through the metallic ocean, through the helium rain still falling in its unhurried thousands of years, up through the layers of thickening hydrogen, all the way to where you are drifting. You are not sinking into a void, you are sinking toward a hearth. And it is that same hearth, that same tireless furnace at the bottom of the house, that begins now to lift you back out of it. Heat this old, and this patient does not stay still. It rises, the way warmth always finds its way up and out, carrying whatever drifts near it along for the climb. You feel it first as a kind of buoyancy, a gentle upward lean in the dark, as if the planet itself has decided you have seen enough of its basement and is quietly returning you to the light. Currents born from that deep core glow are already threading up through the metallic sea, up through the layer where the rain still falls, up toward the thickening and thinning, where liquid remembers how to be gas again. You do not have to climb. You only have to let go of the basement floor that was never really there, and let the same warmth that frightened you from a distance carry you, unhurried, back toward the clouds. There is a kind of relief particular to this exact moment, the one where a story you braced yourself against turns, in your own hands, into something closer to comfort. The house told you there was a basement with no bottom, and there is. The house told you the dark down there was the frightening part, and it isn't. What waits under the floor of every fear, it turns out, can simply be warmth that has been rising, unnoticed the entire time you were afraid of it. Let the current take you. Let the long climb begin on its own, without any pulling from you at all, the ancient furnace far below doing the only work it has ever known how to do, pushing gently upward, patiently upward, toward the ceiling of ammonia cloud, where the next room of this house is already beginning to lighten. The same warmth that lit the crypt is the warmth that lifts you now. You feel the current take you before you understand it has happened, a long, patient exhale rising from that furnace far below, carrying you up through layers you only just learned the names of, past the metallic dark, past the endless helium rain, up through hydrogen turning from liquid back to gas, up until the pressure that once seemed like a weight upon the chest becomes instead a hand at your back, guiding rather than crushing. There is no floor in this house, you remember, but there was never a fall either. There was only ever this, an updraft finding you in the deepest room and deciding, gently, to bring you home. And now, you are weightless. Not falling, not floating in the anxious way a dream sometimes floats, weightless the way a held breath is weightless, the way the space between two heartbeats holds no weight at all. Imagine it fully, you drifting up past the last pale ribbons of ammonia cloud, up through air that thins from gold to amber to something almost clear, until the cloud tops fall away beneath you like a floor you no longer need. And then, you are through. You are outside. You are hanging above the vast curved shoulder of the planet, its limb glowing low and warm along one edge where sunlight, faint as it is out here, still finds something to catch. Out here there is no sound at all, and you find, almost immediately, that you do not miss it. There is no wind to carry a sound even if one were made, no air thick enough to hold a note, and the hush is not the hush of a room where you are listening for danger. It is the hush of a room where the danger has already been ruled out, where quiet is simply what is left once nothing needs announcing. Your own heartbeat is the loudest thing for what might as well be 1 billion kilometers, and even that begins to slow, matching itself without effort to the unhurried scale of everything around it. Your limbs have nothing to press against, and so they simply stop asking to. Whatever you were carrying in your shoulders when this night began has nowhere left to sit. It drifts off from you the way a coat slips from a hook that is no longer there. This is what it is to be held the way water holds a floating body, not gripped, not pulled, just supported, every part of you cradled equally, no single point of you asked to bear more than any other. Saturn does this. Even now, even from outside its clouds, the planet has not let go of you. It has only changed the shape of its grip. Down in the depths it held you with pressure. Up here it holds you with something wider, something you cannot see, but can, if you let your attention soften toward it, almost feel. An invisible field, immense past easy imagining, curving out around the whole planet like 2 arms meeting behind a back. This is the magnetosphere, and it is larger, edge to edge, than the planet could ever hope to be alone. Larger than Saturn, larger than its rings, a shape drawn not in matter but in force, and it has been standing here, unhurried and unseen, the entire time you were walking through the storms and the hexagon and the basement with no floor. It was never a separate room. It was the walls of the house. You did not notice it because a wall you are safe behind rarely announces itself. That is what walls are for. This one is built from charged particles instead of stone, spun into shape by the same deep motions that keep the core turning far below, a slow magnetic breath, generated in that same warm dark you have just left, reaching all the way out here to stand between you and the raw wind of the sun. The solar wind arrives streaming outward from 3 million miles away, fast and thin and endless, and Saturn's field simply leans into it, deflects it, lets it slide past and around the way a held umbrella lets rain find the ground instead of your shoulders. You were never exposed out here. You only felt exposed. The way a room feels larger and colder before you learn it has walls. If you could see the whole shape of that field from far enough away, you would find it is not round at all, but drawn long, pressed flat on the side that faces the sun, and drawn out into a long tapering tail on the side that faces away, the way any shelter takes on the shape of whatever it is standing against. It answers the sun's pressure, the way a curtain answers a draft, billowing back but never tearing, holding its line without needing to hold it rigidly. And you are somewhere inside that long, tapering calm right now, tucked well behind the part of the wall that faces the weather, which is perhaps why none of this feels alarming even as your mind, in its old daytime habit, tries once or twice to call it strange. It is not strange. It is simply large enough that you have never had reason to notice it before tonight. And where that invisible field gathers itself most densely, near the poles, something is happening that you can actually see if you let your eyes adjust to the size of it. Faint curtains of light, green and violet and pale rose, lift and fold and settle again above the northern and southern crowns of the planet. Saturn's own aurorae, painted the same way Earth's are, by particles funneling down along magnetic lines until they meet the upper air and give back their energy as color instead of heat. They do not flare. They do not startle. They simply glow, low and patient, brightening and easing by turns, like a pilot light kept lit in an empty hallway, so that no one arriving in the dark ever has to feel their way forward blind. You watch them for a while and understand, without needing the thought to arrive in words, that this whole enormous structure, the storms, the six-sided wind, the fathomless warm interior, and now this shielding arm of light, was never a haunting. It was a household. It has been keeping you, the whole time, the way a house keeps the people sleeping inside it, unnoticed, unglamorous, and completely reliable. There is nothing more to prove here, and so nothing more is asked of you. This is not a room with a lesson waiting at its center. It is simply breath. It is simply the pause a body takes between one long effort and the next, and you are allowed to take it fully. Let your shoulders find whatever is holding them. Let your jaw loosen the way the cloud tops loosened beneath you, dissolving from something solid into something you could pass through without harm. You are not doing anything right now except being carried. And being carried, it turns out, asks nothing of you at all. No vigilance, no analysis, no watching for the next uncanny thing. Only this long, easy drift, outward over the gold-lit curve of a world that has already shown you its worst room and let you leave it warmer than you entered. Time moves differently out here, unhurried the way it moves in the last minutes before sleep, when a single thought can stretch and soften and lose its edges without ever quite finishing. You drift for what could be a minute or could be an hour, past the last faint shimmer of the aurora, past the place where the magnetic arms curve furthest from the planet, and begin, slowly, to bend back toward it, cradling everything within their reach, the way a house's outer wall still belongs to the rooms inside. Nothing pulls at you. Nothing asks you to hurry. The whole point of this stretch of the journey is its lack of urgency, the sense that you could simply stay suspended here, weightless above a golden world, for as long as your body needs to remember what safety feels like from the outside as well as the in. And it is into this unhurried drift, this held and weightless quiet, that something new begins to rise ahead of you, not sudden, not startling, only a line of light where before there was only dark, widening by degrees the further you float, catching what little sun reaches this far out and returning it as something closer to shine than glow. You do not need to reach for it. It is coming toward you the same way everything else tonight has arrived, unbidden, at its own patient pace, a plane of pale brightness lifting itself into view along the edge of your sight, as though a great window somewhere ahead has just begun to catch the first low light of morning, and the house, still carrying you gently outward, is turning you, without effort, to face it. And the plane of light you saw rising ahead is not a wall. It is a window. You drift toward it the way a sleeper drifts toward the one lit pane at the end of a long, dark corridor. And as you near it, the light stops being a single sheet and becomes something made, countless small pieces, catching the sun, each one throwing its own tiny flare before dimming and catching again. This is the room the whole house has been leading you to. This is where the haunted becomes stained glass. Up close, what looked from Earth like a solid golden hoop dissolves into particulars. The rings are made of billions upon billions of individual pieces of almost pure water ice, some no larger than a grain of sugar, some the size of a boulder, a few, rarely, as large as a house. each one its own small moon in miniature, each one orbiting Saturn on its own quiet path, and together, from any distance, they blur into a single luminous plane. You could spend a lifetime and still not count them, and yet the whole structure is almost unbelievably thin. Spread across some 280,000 kilometers, wide enough to lay end to end nearly 3/4 of the way to the moon, the rings in places are only about 10 meters thick. 10 meters, holding a room that wide. If Saturn were the height of a cathedral door, its rings would be a leaf of glass laid flat across the threshold, and light passes through that leaf and comes out colored, patterned, alive. Nothing here is random, though from a distance it might look that way. Might look like a haze thrown carelessly across the dark. Look closer, the way your eye adjusts once it has been in a dim room a while, and the plane resolves into bands, into gaps, into grooves, as deliberate as the ribs of a vaulted ceiling. Between the widest bands runs the Cassini division, a dark seam over 4,000 kilometers wide, carved not by any hand, but by the patient, repeating tug of the moon Mimas, whose orbit falls into a rhythm with the ice at that distance. 2 beats of Mimas for every 1 beat of the ring particles there. A resonance that, cycle after cycle, over and over, nudges the ice out of that lane and leaves it clear. Elsewhere, small moons barely a few kilometers across ride within the rings themselves, shepherding the edges of certain bands the way a hand might smooth a curtain, holding a boundary crisp that would otherwise blur and spread. What reads, at first glance, as chaos, a swirl of debris around a distant world, is in fact keeping perfect time. Tens of thousands of small gravitational conversations happening at once. Each one polite, each one exact, each one adding another line to the pattern. The house, again, was built. Nothing here is haunting anyone. Everything here is architecture. Even the names given to the different bands read like the rooms of a building someone walked through with a lantern, naming what they found as they went, before they understood the whole plan. The 2 brightest and widest, called simply the A ring and the B ring, form the great nave you are drifting through now. Closer to Saturn, fainter, more translucent, lies the C ring, sometimes called the crepe ring for how thin and veil-like it looks against the cloud tops beneath it. Farther out, past the edge of the A ring, a slender braided thread called the F ring winds along its own narrow lane, kept impossibly tight and knotted by 2 small shepherd moons, Prometheus and Pandora, that pass it back and forth between them like hands trading a ribbon, one tugging it inward, the other tugging it out, so that it never spreads, never smooths, and stays forever, a fine dark stitch of thread at the very edge of the window. Each band has its own light, its own faint tint of ice and old dust, the way different panes in the same window might carry different colors depending on what was melted into the glass. None of it needs a keeper standing over it, adjusting it by hand, hushing it into order. It has already found its own order, and has been holding it patiently for longer than any of the fear about this room deserved. And here is the room where you might expect the fear to return, because even the story of how the rings came to be carries an old, sharp word in it: destruction. One of the leading ideas is that the rings are the remains of a moon, or perhaps several icy bodies, that wandered too close to Saturn and crossed an invisible boundary called the Roche limit, the distance inside which a planet's gravity pulls harder on the near side of a body than the far side, harder and harder, until the difference is too much, and the body is drawn apart, not violently in an instant, but steadily, in long ribbons, ice unspooling from itself and settling into orbit. Say it plainly, and it sounds like a ghost story, a world torn apart at the threshold. But sit with it a moment longer, the way you have learned to sit with the other rooms in this house, and the shape of it changes. What was pulled apart did not vanish. It was translated, turned from a single dense body into billions of small, brilliant surfaces, each one catching and returning the light of a sun 1 billion kilometers away, so that a single dark moon, undone, became the most luminous structure in the entire solar system. Grief, if that is even the right word for something that happened long before there was anyone to grieve it, resolved itself into ornament. The wreckage did not stay wreckage. It became glasswork, and it became the very thing that makes this planet, of all the planets, worth turning to look at twice. And there is a gentler possibility folded into that same idea, one that some scientists find increasingly likely, that this destruction and this beauty may be young. Not primordial, not older than the dinosaurs, not present since the earliest days of the solar system, but recent, geologically speaking, perhaps only tens of millions of years old, formed sometime after the first flowering plants had already opened on Earth. If that is so, then the rings you are looking at right now are not an ancient scar. They are closer to a candle only just lit, still burning steadily, still bright, still being fed even now, because the ice is not static, not sealed forever in its lane. It drifts. It spirals, slowly, inward, some of it raining down onto Saturn's cloud tops as a fine, continuous mist of water, falling for millions of years yet to come before the rings, someday thin and fade. You are not looking at a monument. You are looking at something alive in its own unhurried way, tens of millions of years into a story that is still being told, still falling, still catching the light on its way down. This is the trick every room in this house has played. If you look back over the whole walk so far, the storms that sounded like a haunting were only weather keeping a season. The hexagon that looked like an impossible geometry was only wind finding its own steady shape. The bottomless dark of the interior was only heat, banked low and patient, warming the whole structure from beneath. And now the rings, whose very origin story begins with a word like destruction, turn out to be the most ornamental proof yet that this house was never cursed at all. It was designed, or perhaps simply allowed, by nothing but time and gravity and ice to become exactly this: light passed through matter and returned to you as color, as pattern, as an enormous, quiet window standing in the middle of otherwise empty space. A haunted house does not have stained glass. A haunted house has boarded windows and shadows that move without a source. This house has neither. This house has a nave 280,000 kilometers wide, and you are floating inside it, and the light on your skin, if you had skin out here, would be old sunlight, thinned by the long trip outward, given one more soft color by ice before it reached you. You let yourself turn, slowly, the way you might turn in a great hall to take in a window from a different angle and watch the whole pattern shift with your point of view. The rings tilting, brightening, the countless small pieces resettling into a single sheet of gold-white light as your perspective changes. And in turning, you find yourself facing back the way you came, back across the long dark you crossed at the very start of the night, back past the orbit of Jupiter you never even paused at, back through all that thinning sunlight, to a place so far now that it no longer looks like a place at all. It looks like a single point of light, caught for a moment in the gaps between the ice, the way a candle flame might be glimpsed through a window from far down a lane on a winter night. It takes you a moment to understand what you are looking at. Then you do. It is home. It is Earth, small enough now to disappear behind a thought, hanging steady in the gap between one ring and the next, waiting quietly for you to notice it was there all along. And still, you are turned this way, facing back the way you came, the rings spread behind you like glasswork, catching a light that has traveled a very long way to find it. This is the part of the walk through the haunted house where you finally look over your shoulder, and instead of a threshold receding into shadow, you find a window. Not the kind that lets you see out, the kind that lets you see how far you've come. In the year 2013, on a July day, chosen for exactly this reason, a spacecraft that had been circling Saturn for nearly a decade turned its cameras away from the planet it was built to study and pointed them instead toward a place in the dark where nothing much seemed to be happening. It held that pointing for a while, patient the way only a machine following careful instructions can be patient, and it gathered light, ring light, cloud light, the hush of vacuum between, into a mosaic of the whole Saturnian scene, rings unrolled edge to edge like a great pale ribbon across the frame. And underneath that ribbon, in a gap between two of the rings where the dark shows through, there is a single point, a mote. A pixel the color of a robin's egg, so small that if no one had told you to look for it, you would have let your eye pass right over it and called that patch of sky empty. That point is Earth. That point is everyone. Every argument you've ever had, and every one you've ever made up. Every bill that felt too large for one evening to hold. Every name you love. Every name you've lost. Every room you've ever slept in. And every worry that kept you from sleeping in it. All of it. The whole overflowing ledger of a life, sitting inside a single soft pixel. A smudge of blue caught almost by accident in the corner of a much bigger photograph. They named the picture afterward, with a gentleness that still reaches across all these years, the day the Earth smiled. Millions of people were told in advance to look up and know that a small silver eye, almost 1.5 billion kilometers away, was looking back. You could have been one of them. Maybe some part of you was. Maybe you stood outside that very evening, in whatever year of your life it happened to catch you, tipping your face toward a sky that had no idea it was being photographed from the far side of the rings, and simply waved, the way people do when a camera is pointed at them from somewhere they can't quite see. There is no continent visible in that pixel, no coastline, no city lights, no single face among the billions turned upward that day. The photograph was never fine enough for that, and somehow that is the tender part rather than the disappointing one. It means the picture does not separate you from anyone. Every stranger you have ever passed without a glance, every person whose worries run in some entirely different shape than your own, is folded into that same one point of light alongside you. Indistinguishable. Held in exactly the same soft focus. Out here, at this distance, the differences that feel so loud bearing up close simply run out of room to matter. There is only the one dot, glowing faintly blue, everyone in it together, whether they ever meant to be or not. Here is the strange comfort in it, the kind that only shows itself once you stop expecting the vastness to be unkind. A window this large, in a house this large, was never built to make you feel forgotten in it. Think of the difference between being lost in a dark field and being held in a wide, quiet room. The field has no walls, no floor you can trust, nothing to lean your shoulder against, while the room, however enormous, is still a room, still built around you, still keeping something outside so that you can rest something inside. That is what this cathedral has been doing since the first threshold, since the front walk thinned to porch light and the porch opened into storm, since the storm gave way to the hexagon's 6 patient walls, since the basement's dark turned out to be warm. Room by room, the frightening thing kept resolving into architecture. And here, in the room made of ring light and old photographs, the vastness itself resolves the same way. It isn't a void closing in around your small dot of a life. It's a nave. It has a ceiling higher than any fear you could bring into it. And that height is not there to dwarf you. It's there so that whatever you're carrying has somewhere to go besides your own 2 hands. Let it go there now, if you're carrying anything tonight. Whatever list keeps threading itself behind your eyes, whatever tomorrow keeps tapping at the window of tonight, hand it toward that little blue pixel floating between rings 1.5 billion kilometers off, and notice how easily it fits. It was always going to fit. Distance has a way of doing the arithmetic for us when we won't do it ourselves. Seen from far enough away, the sharpest edges soften, the loudest arguments go quiet. The whole tangled evening you've been rehearsing shrinks down to something you could hold on one fingertip and still have room left over. You did not shrink because you stopped mattering. You shrank because, for one photograph, someone finally pulled the frame back far enough to show you how much room there has always been around you. That room was never empty. It was only ever unmeasured. And the thing doing the holding out here is not indifference. It's gravity, patient and exact. The same soft law that keeps every ring particle turning in its lane and every moon in its long, unhurried circuit, and it does not know how to let go of what it holds. It has been holding this whole scene together for longer than any worry you've ever had has existed. And it will keep holding it long after that worry has quietly dissolved into something you can't even remember the shape of. You don't have to hold yourself up tonight. You never really did. The floor of this cathedral is gravity, and gravity does not tire, does not forget, does not set anything down by accident. Let your shoulders believe that, even if the rest of you takes a little longer to catch up. Being small, out here, does not mean being unheld. It means the opposite. It means there was always something large enough to hold you, and tonight, you finally got far enough away to see the shape of its hands. This is, perhaps, the truest thing the whole house has been trying to tell you, room after room, that its size was never a warning. A cathedral is not built enormous to remind the person kneeling in the last pew how little they are. It is built enormous so that grief and joy and every ordinary Tuesday in between can all fit inside it at once without crowding each other out. So that a single small light, a candle, a pixel, a person turning over in bed on the far side of the solar system can burn in it for hours and never once feel like it's in danger of being the only thing in the room. You are not competing with this vastness for space. You were given space, all of it, on loan, the moment you were born small enough to need it. Tonight you are simply remembering the terms of that loan and finding them kinder than you'd feared. So let the dot stay small. Let the worry stay small along with it. Somewhere behind you now, past the rings, past the reach of the picture that held you a moment ago, the ordinary night is still turning over your bed the way it always has, and none of it needs your hands on it to keep turning. You can set it down here, in this room built from ring light and old radio signals crossing 1.5 billion kilometers of quiet dark, and it will still be there, unharmed, whenever you decide to pick it up again, except you may find, by morning that you no longer want to. And it's in this stillness, this low, unhurried settling, that you start to notice you are not alone out here after all. Not in the way the dark first made it seem. Scattered around Saturn, at different distances, in different quiet corners of the same wide room, small lights have been waiting the whole time. Dozens of them, more than 80 counted so far, each one catching a little of the same pale sunlight and holding it, faint and steady, like a candle set into a side chapel just off the main hall of the cathedral. From out here they look almost like an afterthought, small enough to miss if your eyes are still adjusting from the brightness of the rings. But each one is a whole small world, with its own weather, its own history, its own reasons for glowing the way it does. You feel your attention drift toward the nearest of them now, the way your eyes drift toward the one candle in a dim room that seems somehow to be burning a little brighter than the rest, and without quite deciding to, you begin drifting there too. Those small lights you noticed, scattered through the dark around the rings, are not candle flames exactly, though the mind reaches for that word without being asked to. They are moons, dozens of them, some no larger than a city, a few large enough to have their own weather, their own oceans, their own sky. In a haunted house, you would call them the other doors down the hall, the rooms you almost decided not to open. Tonight, you open them anyway, unhurried, because you already know what waits behind every door in this particular house. Not a fright, but a small chapel, lit from within, waiting to be found. You drift toward the nearest light first, and it resolves into something almost too bright to look at directly. A moon the color of fresh snow, reflecting nearly every photon of sunlight that reaches it, so pale it seems to glow with its own quiet insistence, even from a distance. This is Enceladus, barely the width of Britain, small enough that you could walk its full circumference in the time it takes to watch a long film, and for a long while it was assumed to be exactly what it looked like, an inert white stone, too small and too cold to be anything but frozen through to its center. Then the Cassini spacecraft passed close, and along its southern pole it found the surface torn into 4 long parallel fractures, nicknamed tiger stripes for the way they mark the ice like something alive underneath had left claw marks on its way out. And something had, in a sense. Through those stripes, Enceladus vents geysers, plumes of salted water vapor and ice, rising for hundreds of kilometers into space, fed by an ocean of liquid water sealed beneath the frozen crust, kept warm not by sunlight, which barely reaches this far, but by the tidal flexing of Saturn's gravity working the moon's interior like patient hands kneading dough, generation after generation of squeeze and release. Every time you picture a geyser, you may have pictured heat and violence, something to flinch from. Picture instead a fountain in a walled garden at night, water catching starlight as it arcs and falls, endless and unbothered, falling back into snow that eventually drifts outward and joins Saturn's faint E-ring, meaning this whole broad band of the rings is, in its own way, the quiet exhale of a hidden sea. Scientists studying that vapor have found salts in it and organic molecules, and the ingredients chemistry uses to build the first sentences of life, which is why so many now consider this small white moon, this room you almost skipped, one of the most promising places in the entire solar system to go looking for something alive. A haunted-looking snowball turns out to hold a warm ocean and a fountain, and perhaps the beginnings of a story no one has finished reading yet. Between the two, drifting closer to the rings than either, a scatter of far smaller moons do their own patient work, shepherding the ring particles into their narrow lanes, smoothing the edges of gaps, catching stray ice before it can wander. You need not remember their names to feel what they're doing, sweeping the floors of the cathedral, keeping the stained glass in its frame, so faint and so busy that most nights they pass unnoticed, the way the hinge of a door goes unnoticed, until someone points out that the door has, this whole time, been swinging true. Further out drifts a moon that looks, from a distance, wrapped in a shroud, a hazy orange world with no visible surface at all, its features smudged behind a thick, permanent haze the color of a low autumn sun. This is Titan, larger than the planet Mercury, and the only moon in the solar system wearing a real atmosphere, thick enough that a human standing on its surface could, in principle, strap wings to their arms and fly through air nearly 1.5 times as dense as Earth's. Beneath that orange sky, methane and ethane behave the way water behaves here. They evaporate into clouds. They fall as rain. They pool into rivers that carve valleys and drain into lakes and seas spread across the northern latitudes, an entire weather system built from ingredients that would be fuel on Earth and are, on Titan, simply the sky's ordinary business. Radar mapping through the haze has traced shorelines and river deltas eerily familiar in shape, as if someone had sketched a coastal map of home and then swapped every word for its colder cousin. Nothing about this should frighten you. It is only home's blueprint, drawn in a different, more patient hand, at a temperature where the ordinary becomes exotic simply by being far enough from the sun. Titan keeps its own weather, its own tides pulled by Saturn, its own seasons that last over 7 years apiece, and it does all of this in near total hush, beneath a sky that never quite clears, a shrouded room that turns out to be the coziest one in the house, orange lit and self-contained, humming along on its own unhurried clock. Not every moon needs an ocean or a sky to earn its place among the chapels. Mimas, one of the smallest and closest of Saturn's major moons, carries a single enormous scar, the Herschel crater. Stretching across nearly a third of the moon's own diameter, its central peak rising as tall as some of Earth's mountains, ringed by walls so steep they cast long shadows for much of the moon's day. From certain angles, lit just so. The crater and the walls surrounding it give Mimas an unmistakable resemblance to a great staring eye set into a ball of ice, and if you were building a haunted house from spare parts, you could hardly design a more unsettling ornament than a moon that appears to watch you as you pass. Whoever or whatever struck Mimas hit it hard enough that the impact should, by most calculations, have shattered a body this small into rubble. Instead, the moon simply absorbed the blow, cracked and rang like a struck bell for a while, and then went on holding its shape, holding its orbit, holding its silence. But sit with the staring eye a moment longer, and the fear loosens on its own. This is simply the oldest kind of scar a small world can carry. The frozen record of one collision, ancient and finished, that the moon has worn ever since the way old buildings wear their cracks in the plaster. Not a threat repeating, just a single old story etched once into stone and left in peace. A wound so far in the past, it has become nothing more than a feature of the face. And drifting further still, at the far edge of Saturn's family, moves a moon that seems unable to decide what it is. Iapetus turns one face toward its orbit and the other away, and by some slow accumulation of dark, carbon-rich dust, swept up from a farther, darker moon and drawn inward over millions of years, one hemisphere has become nearly as black as coal, while the other stays bright as bone. Seen from one side, Iapetus looks like a shadow given shape. Seen from the other, like a lantern. Early astronomers, watching it brighten and dim as it swung around the planet, genuinely wondered whether they were looking at one moon or two, a small mystery that lingered for centuries before spacecraft finally caught both faces at once and settled it. Not a haunting. Not a trick of vanishing and reappearing, only dust drifting patiently across ice over an almost unthinkable stretch of time, painting one cheek and leaving the other pale. This, it turns out, is the pattern the whole moon system keeps repeating for you, room after room. From a distance, each one reads as something to be wary of: a blank white stone, a shrouded orange fog, a staring wound in the ice, a face that cannot decide if it is night or day. And each time you come close enough to actually look, the fear has nowhere left to stand, because what's inside is a warm sea venting quietly into starlight, or a weather system running its patient rivers under a low sun, or the healed scar of one old collision, or simply dust settling the way dust settles everywhere, without malice, without design against you. Some of these small chapels may even be keeping the one thing that would make this whole cathedral feel less empty: the faint, unproven, entirely plausible chemistry of life, tucked into the coldest, darkest reaches of the house, kept warm by nothing more dramatic than gravity's patient squeeze. Not ghosts in the walls, pilot lights, left burning, and drifting there now, half inside sleep already, surrounded by a lit ring and a ring of lit moons, you might find yourself asking, in the unhurried way a question arrives right before rest: how does anyone even come to know a thing like this? How does a species standing on one small blue dot, so many hundreds of millions of kilometers away, ever learn the color of a moon's ocean, or the shape of a crater's shadow, or the number of a planet's rings? The answer is older and gentler than you'd expect, and it starts, long before any spacecraft, with a single curious man and a hand-ground lens, looking up on a clear night and noticing that this steady golden lamp in the sky did not look quite the way a lamp should. And that is the honest answer to your drowsy question, the one drifting loose at the edge of sleep, the one about how anyone came to know a small lit chapel so many candle hours from home. Nobody kicked down the door of this house in a single night. Nobody arrived with torches and declared the haunting solved. It happened the way real understanding almost always happens, in small increments of patient looking, one visitor at a time, across 4 centuries, each one adding a single window to the same slowly rising cathedral. The first visitor came in the autumn of 1610. A man named Galileo bent over a spyglass, no better than a cheap toy by later standards, and what he saw made no sense to him at all. Saturn did not look like a single golden point. It looked like it had ears, 2 faint bulges, one on either side, as if the planet were listening for something. He sketched them, doubted them, watched them, and within 2 years they seemed to vanish entirely, the planet going smooth and round again before his eyes. He never solved it. He carried the mystery to his own rest without an answer. And there is something tender in that, a man handing an unfinished question forward into the dark, trusting someone else to sit with it after him. That is allowed. Not every room needs to be opened by the one who first knocks on its door. Someone did open it, 45 years later. Christian Huygens, working with a sharper lens and a steadier evening, looked at the same ears and understood, at last, that they were not ears, not handles, not 2 moons pressed close against the planet's sides. They were a ring, a thin, flat, encircling ring, tilted at an angle to our line of sight so that it seemed to grow and shrink and disappear as Saturn carried it around the sun. Imagine the relief in that moment, the way a hallway you have been avoiding turns out, once the lamp is finally lit, to hold nothing but a coat rack and a window. In the same unhurried year of looking, Huygens found something else nearby, a steady point of light keeping faithful company with the planet, Titan, the largest of Saturn's moons, though he could not have known yet about its orange sky or its rivers of liquid methane, could not have guessed that 3.5 centuries later, a small metal traveler would fall gently through that very sky and land. He simply noted a light that belonged and moved on. One clear answer and one new doorway, opened by the same careful eye in the same unhurried season. Then came Giovanni Domenico Cassini, watching through his own long nights at the eyepiece, the kind of watching that asks for nothing but time. He found 4 more moons circling patiently in the dark, and in 1675 he noticed something finer still, a narrow gap running clean through the ring, dividing it into 2 bands where before there had seemed to be only one. That gap still carries his name today, the Cassini division, a thin dark seam of nearly empty space where a moon's gentle gravitational tug clears the path, sweeping ring particles aside the way a hand might part a curtain. It was not a flaw in the glasswork. It was proof the glasswork had structure, that even the ornament of this cathedral had been shaped by unseen hands of physics working with the same slow faithfulness as everything else we have walked through tonight. For a long while after Cassini, the watching stayed earthbound, telescopes growing larger, drawings growing finer, but always at that great distance, always through the thin blur of our own atmosphere. Generation after generation of watchers took their unhurried turn at the eyepiece, adding a moon here, a faint marking there. None of it dramatic, all of it accumulating. The way a cathedral's stonework accumulates one carved block at a time, long before anyone standing at ground level can see the shape of the whole ceiling. Then, in the last decades of the last century, something new. Our instruments learned to leave the porch and walk up the path themselves. Pioneer 11 passed close by Saturn in 1979, the first visitor ever to arrive in person, sending back a handful of grainy, astonished images before continuing on into the dark beyond, a single quiet knock on a door that had waited 3.5 centuries to be answered. The 2 Voyager spacecraft followed soon after, in 1980 and 1981, moving faster and seeing further. And it was Voyager that first showed us the hexagon holding steady at the North Pole. That 6-sided room we have already walked through together tonight, its walls unmoving even as everything around it churned, a piece of order so unexpected that it took years of checking before anyone fully trusted what the pictures were showing them. But the deepest visit, the one that finally moved in and stayed rather than passing through, belonged to Cassini, Huygens, named, fittingly, for both of those early watchers at the eyepiece, as if the mission itself were a quiet thank you letter sent 400 years into the past. Cassini arrived in 2004 and did something no probe had done before. It slipped into orbit around Saturn and simply stayed there, circling for 13 years, patient the way only a spacecraft with no need for sleep can be patient, returning again and again past the rings, past the moons, past the storms, gathering a portrait built not from one glance, but from thousands of unhurried ones. And it carried a passenger. In January of 2005, the Huygens probe separated and fell gently through Titan's thick orange atmosphere, its parachute opening right on schedule, and it touched down, softly, on solid ground wet with liquid methane, the first landing humanity ever made anywhere in the outer solar system. For a short while after, it kept sending pictures back from a world so far from home that the sunlight there is a dim, honeyed dusk at every hour. Then it fell quiet, its work complete, resting where it landed, and it is resting there still. Cassini itself kept circling for 12 more years, watching Enceladus vent its bright plumes, watching the hexagon turn, watching the rings glow gold and grow gray in shadow and gold again. And when its fuel finally ran low, its keepers on Earth made a choice that says something about the whole 4 centuries of looking that came before it. Rather than let the spacecraft drift and someday, by pure accident, crash into Enceladus or Titan and contaminate the very oceans it had spent over a decade proving might hold the warm chemistry of life, they aimed it, deliberately, downward. In September of 2017, Cassini was sent gently into Saturn's own clouds, into the same golden atmosphere that hides that furnace-lit deep we sat with earlier. Tonight, and it was allowed to come apart there, its signal thinning and finally going silent as it dissolved into the planet it had spent 13 years learning to love. It was not a loss. It was a kind of tenderness, the last gesture of an instrument built by patient hands, protecting the very rooms it had helped turn from rumor into fact. 400 years, then, from a blurred pair of ears in a cheap spyglass to a spacecraft folding itself softly into golden cloud to keep a hidden ocean safe. Nothing about Saturn was ever exorcised. No haunting was banished, no fear driven out by force. It only ever needed time, and someone willing to keep looking after the last person set the telescope down for the night. Room by room, the reports of moaning winds turned into jet streams with names and speeds. The reports of shifting shapes turned into rings with widths measured in meters. The reports of a distant cold, watching light turned into a magnetosphere that had been sheltering the whole neighborhood the entire time. That is what 4 centuries of gentle attention does to a haunted house. It does not tear the house down. It opens every door, lets the light in one room at a time, and by the last door you find you are not standing in a house that was ever cursed at all, but in a cathedral, built slowly, by many patient hands, meant all along to be stood inside and looked up at. You are standing at that door now. The ring light falls across the floor in long pale bands, quiet as it has always been, and there is nowhere further you need to walk tonight. The storms are seasonal, and they will keep their season without you. The hexagon will keep turning at the same steady pace whether you are watching or not. The moons will keep their slow orbits, small candles burning on, patient as they have always been. 4 centuries of looking have already done the work of understanding, so that all that is left for you now is the resting. Your breath has slowed to match the drift of the rings, wide and unhurried. The gold light dims by fractions, the way it does at the end of a long-held open evening. Somewhere far below the clouds, the deep furnace still glows, keeping its low and faithful watch, asking nothing of you at all. Tonight has been about a doorstep, and the dark that gathered there only because we hadn't stepped inside yet. The long, dim approach across the outer solar system that turned out to be nothing more than distance, patient and enormous, and entirely harmless from where you're lying now. Tonight has been about the haunted rooms, the storms, wide as continents, the strange 6-sided pattern turning at the pole like a window frame with no house behind it, the long fall toward a center that never quite arrives at anything solid, because there is no floor down there to dread. Only gas thinning into more gas, into hush. Tonight has been about the corridors of light, the rings themselves, ice and stone catching a distant sun and passing it hand to hand across hundreds of thousands of kilometers. A hallway so vast and so orderly that the haunting we carried in with us at the doorstep simply had nowhere left to hide. And tonight has been about the cathedral revealed, the moons like candle-lit side chapels along the nave, each one holding its own small mystery, and the long, unhurried history of human eyes. From the first person who noticed Saturn wasn't quite round through every patient instrument since, that kept looking into this same darkness until it stopped being frightening and started being beautiful. None of this needs anything from you tonight. You don't have to remember the hexagon, or the name of a single moon, or which region came first. You don't have to hold on to any of it. It was only ever a house we walked through together, and now that we're standing on the other side of it, you can let the whole house go, and keep only the feeling of having walked through something vast and found it kind after all. Another quiet exploration is already waiting on the screen, right where you are, and you don't have to do anything at all. Just let it begin on its own, and let your eyes stay closed, and let the next voice carry you the way this one did. And if you find yourself awake for a moment longer, here's a small thing to loosen into. Nothing to answer, nothing to solve. Which room of tonight's house would you like to sit in a little longer, if you could? The doorstep, the storms, the rings, or the chapels of moonlight at the very end? You don't need to know. You don't need to decide anything tonight. Let your breathing find its own rhythm now, slower than your thoughts, slower than the turning of any ringed and distant world. Let your eyelids rest fully closed. Let the weight of the day drain out through your shoulders, through your arms, down and away, the way starlight drains out of a summer sky by morning. There is nowhere else you need to be, and nothing else you need to do, and no more doors left to open tonight. Only this one long, unhurried settling, this last easy exhale, this hushed room you've made for yourself in the dark. Sleep well.